I think there's only one possible way to comment on this, and that is that the talk about a free, democratic, rule of law country that we will have after the revolution turned out to be complete gibberish and lies. We see attempts to ban not just a political party that represents hundreds of thousands and even millions of voters, but even the ideology itself. They want to ban communist ideology. And yes, it's possible to pass a law against it and ban it, or rather, according to this new law, if it is passed, it would ban propaganda or sharing of communist ideas. But of course, banning the ideology itself is not humanly possible. Or rather, according to this new law, if it is passed, it would ban propaganda or sharing of. If Russia is an aggressor state, then why do we have an ambassador there? Why do we negotiate with them? Why do we buy gas from them? Why do we buy electricity? Why do we trade with them? Why do we keep asking them for discounts if they are an aggressor state? So we need to decide for ourselves. If we're at war, then we need to recall our ambassador, stop diplomatic relations, close the border, quit paying them. We're paying the supposedly aggressor state billions of dollars. By the way, our president has a factory in Lipetsk, Russia, that pays taxes to the aggressor state. So we have to be consistent. Either Poroshenko has to close his factory, stop paying taxes to the aggressor state, stop trading with them, and then it will be a consistent, principled position. And currently, how can we call them an aggressor state? Have you ever seen warring states that trade, that pay each other, and have multi-billion-dollar trade? Well, as I have just said, we do have a very close relationship with Russia, trading and in a lot of other ways. Unfortunately, yes. I think this explosion shows that terrorism has come to Kiev, and I think it won't be confined to just Kharkov and Odessa, and will continue spreading. And these tendencies that we see now probably indicate that it will continue spreading around the whole country. And it's spreading because the country is gripped by an atmosphere of hatred, and in the entire country, ideological differences are settled with force, which produces terrorism because all questions are being solved with violence and fear. If the current government stays in power and continues the same policies, I don't think this wave is going to stop, because their policies are one of the drivers of terrorism. Their hateful, aggressive rhetoric, their constant witch hunts and search for enemies, constant talk about destroying the opposition in one way or another, and this overall hateful rhetoric coming from the government itself. I mean all of it. I mean the statements regarding people in Donbass coming from our government officials. I mean government's policy towards those people. Specifically regarding Donbass, there's always statements that there are separatists, terrorists, there are even members of our parliament who... Yes, this is the viewpoint of the current Ukrainian regime that reduces political discourse to intimidation, rule of fear, and terrorism. We need to distinguish between these unknown armed people and the population of Donbass as a whole. So when we hear rhetoric from a lot of people in our government, and we see policies that punish the whole of population of Donbass. Examples: stopping the payment of social security, which goes against constitution, law, and several recent court decisions. Where there's a will, there is a way. The problem is the government has no desire to do this. The specific mechanism is in the Minsk Accords. That's part of the Minsk Accords that our government ignores. It talks about restoring banks, restoring a working financial system, restoring social payments. Well, yes, the ceasefire isn't complete yet, but we see a lot of progress and we need to capitalize on that and continue implementing the agreements.
Ось, на вашу думку, чи можливо взагалі-то?
Where there's a will, there's a way. Remember how last summer some, or rather very few, officials even acknowledged that it's possible to negotiate with the people of Donbass. Back then, the prevailing viewpoint was that we will not negotiate with separatists, nobody ever negotiates with terrorists, separatists, we will simply destroy them, and everything will be great. Then it turned out that we can negotiate with them, it turned out that we can reach agreement, turned out that this is the civilized way of doing things, turned out we can buy coal from them, so where there's a will, there's a way. And as we see, combat has almost stopped, well, if we compare it to what was going on a month ago. Everything has to be considered in context. If we compare to what we've seen in the airport this summer at Ilovaisk, the fighting is dying down, and it's... Sure, DPR and LPR are to a large extent controlled by Kremlin, and our government is controlled by Washington.
Саме в цьому подальше питання.
Yes, unfortunately the resumption of hostilities is quite likely, even though it is completely not in the interest of Ukraine and completely not in the interest of the people living in Ukraine in general and in Donbass. But this is in the interest of a number of outside powers, and as Ksenia correctly pointed out, we have people with Russian passports in Donbass, although she neglected to mention that people with American, Georgian and Latvian passports are in power here in Kiev, and a lot of issues in our government are resolved with a phone call from the US Embassy. Mr. Kolomoisky, who was a governor until very recently, has openly stated that he has free citizenships. That's the truth, right? Citizens of other countries, US, Georgia, Baltics, whom the president appointed as ministers. There's a lot of evidence that they did not refuse their previous citizenship. Look, the point is, Ukraine is not controlled from within the country. The country is being governed from abroad, and so while it's being governed from abroad, whether the war continues, what our government does, will not be decided in Ukraine. So, unfortunately, if abroad they decide that it's more beneficial for them to continue the war, then the war will continue.